Praise the Lord and welcome to Jesus or Muhammad. That's right, it's Pastor Joseph and David Wood. Sam Shimon's not with us today, but the Holy Spirit is right here in the midst of David and Brother Joseph. And you know, today we're going to continue our series on refuting Shabir Ali. He's not here with us. That's all right. We've got his arguments on tape. You want to say anything before we show that first clip, Brother David?
Yeah, just that this is one of the central disagreements between Christians and Muslims. For Christians, Jesus' death by crucifixion is one of the three core elements of the Christian gospel. Right. So you look at the book of Acts, you see what message Jesus' followers went out and preached. They always talked about Jesus' divine nature. He is Lord. He died on the cross for sins, and he rose from the dead. Death, resurrection, deity. Death, resurrection, deity. That's the core of the Christian gospel.
Yes.
We look at Islam, and Islam agrees with us on a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Islam agrees with us on things that no one else in the world agrees with us on. So Muslims will tell you Jesus was born of a virgin. Who says that?
Oh, we're so similar.
Yeah. Jesus was born of a virgin. Jesus performed miracles. He lived the most miraculous life in history. Jesus is the Messiah. Allah raised him to himself. He wouldn't even allow him to die. So Muslims agree with us that Jesus had this miraculous beginning, this miraculous middle, and this miraculous end. Where they disagree with us is on, just happens to be, the three core elements of the Christian gospel, and we're told false prophets, false teachers are going to come and corrupt this message. Right?
Right. So here we are refuting Shabir Ali on his contention that Jesus was not crucified. Why don't we show our first clip of the program right now?
In the account of death and resurrection of Jesus, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, what is the difference between Islam and Christianity? How do they differ in terms of the death and resurrection of Jesus?
Let me start with the ascension, because Christians believe that after he died and he resurrected from the dead, he ascended to heaven.
Right.
Muslims also believe that Jesus ascended into heaven. And many don't realize this because the Quran says, "Bal rafa'ahu Allahu ilayhi," but God raised him to himself. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَزِيزًا حَكِيمًا, and God is mighty and wise. So Muslims share with Christians this understanding that Jesus was raised into heaven. Muslims also believe that Jesus will come again, and that is a shared belief with our Christian friends.
All right, so there we have it. So first off, he wants to start with common ground. Yes, we believe
in the ascension, and we believe he's coming again.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll point out, as far as you know, these lots of the beliefs about Jesus, Muslims agree with us on almost everything except for the core of the Christian gospel that we're told false prophets are going to come along and corrupt.
All the less important stuff they agree. The really important, essential stuff, complete disagreement.
Yeah. In other words, think about this. We're told this is the core of Jesus' message, death, resurrection, and deity. But be careful, because false prophets are going to come and they're going to try and corrupt that message, those three things, death, resurrection, deity. Watch out, Christians. False prophets are coming to corrupt that. Muhammad comes along. Oh, you Christians believe in God? So do I. You believe in prophets? So do I. You believe God has sent revelations to the world? So do I. You believe Jesus is born of a virgin? So do I. You believe that Jesus he ascended to heaven? So do I. You believe he's going to come again? So do I. You believe he performed all these miracles? So do I. You believe he's the Messiah? So do I. We agree on everything except for these three things that you've been told false prophets are going to come along and corrupt. Other than that, we can agree on everything. Other than these three things that are the core of Jesus' message, and you've been told false prophets are going to come along and corrupt.
And that's what Muslim apologists say day after day, even now. Say, look, we're so similar. You just got this few things wrong.
Yep.
Are we ready to see the next clip?
Sure. So he's being asked specifically, what are the differences between Christians and Muslims on this? And obviously, the more important question is who's right?
Yeah.
Because this is one area where we obviously teach something very different. The Bible teaches that Jesus died by crucifixion. The Quran, and Shabir Ali is going to read it for us, the Quran maintains that Jesus did not die by crucifixion. So here's something where we believe something different, and we can actually test our religion to see which one is correct. Now, Shabir Ali's position is going to be, and we'll see in these clips, Shabir's position is going to be, but the Bible doesn't really affirm the crucifixion. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of doubt here. There's a lot of room for doubt here.
And notice as you listen to Shabir, it seems as if he is supporting a view which says Jesus was in fact put on the cross and crucified. However, he did not die, so he wasn't technically crucified in his explanation of the definition of crucifixion, meaning to kill. So he kind of fudges here. on the one hand, he goes back and he admits that classical Islamic exposition on this text says that somebody else was made to look like him, but Shabir actually seems to be purporting and pushing forth this idea, well, yeah, Jesus was on the cross, but hey, after all, he didn't get killed. So let's take a look at that clip right now.
Now, when it comes to the crucifixion itself, Muslim classical commentators on the Quran had said that Jesus was not put on the cross, but somebody else was made to look like Jesus, and in that moment of confusion, that other person was put on the cross instead.
There's that classical reference, and Brother David, we don't have to deal much with this, but we find that Shabir actually begins to sort of mitigate against that classical view in what he says later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, no question. No question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once again, it's Shabir or Muhammad, Shabir or the first 1,400 years of Islamic teaching and scholarship.
Yeah, and why that's interesting is Shabir's attitude is, yes, Muslim commentators have said, have interpreted this to mean that someone else was put on the cross. Well, guess what? That's the first 10, I think. I think there's one possible exception which leaves it ambiguous. But of all of our earliest references, they all hold to some version of substitution theory. As far as our Muslim sources, the earliest 10 sources I can find, there's one that leaves it sort of open.
Yeah.
All the rest, very clear substitution theory.
Jesus was not on the cross, according to earliest Islamic classical.
Yeah, and some of these guys are quoting Muhammad. Some of these guys, you could go to Ibn Kathir if you'd like one example. Go to Ibn Kathir, look up Ibn Kathir's commentary on Surah 4, verse 157. You can find it online at Q Tafsir, the letter Q, qtafsir.com. Look up the passage. Very clear substitution theory. Jesus goes to his followers. Who's gonna go in my place? I will. All right, you go then. Yeah. So Shabir is going against centuries of Muslims. Shabir is basically going against 14 centuries of Muslims. This recent development where Muslims say maybe Jesus was nailed to a cross, but maybe he survived. That's a more recent development that comes out of the absolutely strong, airtight, scholarly consensus that Jesus died by crucifixion, right? So they want to admit that Jesus, they want to get as close as they can, right, while still maintaining their Islam.
Right.
And the problem, the other problem that I think they're trying to deal with is, according to the old view, where did Christians get the idea that Jesus died on the cross?
Allah deceives them.
Allah deceived us, right?
Yeah.
Allah deceived us into believing that. So billions of Christians and non-Christians who've believed that Jesus died by crucifixion, we got that false belief from Allah himself. So last week we talked about the corruption of the gospel. Yeah. Muslims say the gospel has been corrupted because the gospel doesn't line up with Islam. Well, I open up my Bible, it says Jesus died by crucifixion. Who corrupted the gospel, if Islam is true?
Right.
Who corrupted? Don't blame the Apostle Paul. Don't blame the Council of Nicaea. Allah corrupted the message by deceiving people into believing that Jesus died on the cross.
Even his disciples were killed for believing a deception of Allah, if that's the case.
Yeah. So I think Muslims like Shabir deep down are bothered by this. They want to try and get away with it, and get away from it. But it doesn't help, because they have to believe that Allah somehow miraculously preserved Jesus on the cross, that he survived, and so you still end up with God deceiving people into believing that Jesus died. In other words, if Jesus didn't die, Allah really needed to clarify that. Allah knows, right? I'm protecting Jesus on the cross. He's going to survive. Oh, wait a minute. Everyone's going to take this and start this largest false religion in history, and people are eventually going to reject Islam because it denies one of the most obvious facts of history, that Jesus died by crucifixion. Allah would have known this and said, hey, I better not go through with this, especially when it's totally pointless, right? What's the point?
Right.
What's the point of it? In other words, I can imagine a situation where God would trick someone, for instance, right? Yeah. So suppose you and I are walking out of ABN and there's a gang of Muslims that are trying to kill us because we said something about Muhammad or Allah or something like this.
That was true.
And suppose God tricks them. Yeah. You quoted our book. You quoted our hadith. How dare you? You must die, right? Now suppose God tricks the Muslim group into believing we went one way when really we went a different way.
He actually did this through the angels in Sodom and Gomorrah, if you remember. He blinded those wicked men so they couldn't go after Lot. You remember? So,
we can imagine situations where God would do this. The question is, why is he doing it, right?
Right.
The question is, why is he doing it?
Yeah.
And if there was some great outcome and, he's tricking these unbelievers or something like that, okay, maybe I can see that. Yeah. In Islam, Allah is tricking people who follow Jesus, right? His followers, people who submitted to God's prophet. He's tricking them. And in the process, he's starting the largest false religion in history. And there's no reason to do it. What good comes out of it? What good comes out of it? Nothing good comes out of it. And so now you've got a God who tricks people for no reason, deceives people for no reason, starts false religions for no reason.
The largest religion in the world, by the way, would be a deception of Allah.
And you say, why? And well, that's just what Allah does. And once you introduce an all-powerful deceiver into your equation here, into your theology, how do you know what to believe?
Well, he is Khair al-Makarena. I guess at least that's consistent if he is in fact the greatest of all deceivers.
Yeah.
But then, of course, what's to say Islam is not a deception?
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
You Muslims, oh, we believe these things about Muhammad. Why do you believe those things about Muhammad? Oh, because God sent him, and so, wait a minute, God sent Jesus and then deceived his followers.
Yes.
And then deceived his followers. If you believe in a God who does that, how do you know you're safe? Right?
Yeah.
And the answer is you can't be. You can't be.
Abu Bakr having 1 foot in heaven wouldn't have been enough for him.
Yeah, that's not us saying that. That's Abu Bakr saying if he had 1 foot in paradise, he would still fear Allah's deception. And that's in other words, if Abu Bakr had 1 foot in paradise, he would still be worried Allah's going to say, ha ha, tricked you, and cast you into hell, right? You don't know with Allah. You don't know. And how different is this from the God we believe in, right? I mean, this is horrible, horrible stuff. And I want to say, this is blasphemous stuff. You're accusing God of being the worst deceiver in history, someone who starts false religions, someone who just does it just because that's his nature to do these evil sorts of things. That's the God you believe in? Out of curiosity, Pastor Joseph, who would the greatest of deceivers be according to the Bible?
It might just be that wicked one known as Satan or the devil.
Interesting.
Yeah, father of lies.
Interesting. Father of lies. Father of lies.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right.
Very interesting.
All right, well, let's get to Shabir's argument. Well, let's see what his actual arguments are.
All right, let's take a look at that next clip right now.
Christians insist that based on the Gospels, it must have been Jesus on the cross. And they think that this is now a solid point of history, and they ask why should Muslims contend that what is known to be a historically proven fact. Whether it is historically proven or not, this is a separate question. But if one were to go to the Gospels and look at them carefully, one would realize that there is some doubt in the Gospels themselves as to whether Jesus actually died at the time when it was commonly believed that he died. You see, nobody checked his pulse. Nobody actually verified medically whether he was actually dead. They just presumed him to be dead.
Well,
no one checked his pulse. No one hooked him up to an EEG, Pastor Joseph.
If they had the red crescent, out there with a van that would have driven up in Jerusalem, then I guess he would have been more satisfied. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, there are 2 points he makes, right? One, he says, well, Christians seem to think that obviously since Jesus was crucified, he's going to die, and that we believe this on the basis of some kind of evidence. And then he wants to say, but the Bible itself, Bible itself is in doubt as to whether he died. As far as Christians believing that the evidence supports Jesus' death by crucifixion, I want to point out that's not just us. Right? There are lots of things that non-Christians would disagree with us about, right? So a non-Christian's going to say Jesus didn't let's say an atheist is going to say Jesus never performed miracles. Never happened. Because miracles don't happen, because there is no God. Or Jesus obviously can't be divine because there is nothing divine, right? So non-Christians, specifically atheists or naturalists, are going to disagree with us on certain things.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting when virtually everyone agrees with us on something.
Even the enemies, the Jews even said they crucified.
Yeah.
The Romans, the secularists.
We have Jewish sources, we have Christian sources, and we have Roman sources, all supporting Jesus' death by crucifixion.
And both biblical and extra-biblical, outside the Bible.
Yeah. And when you get down to our day, critical scholars, and I'm not even talking about Christian scholars, I'm talking about agnostic scholars and atheist scholars.
Yeah.
They not only say that Jesus' death by crucifixion, they don't just say, probably, I guess. Yeah. Like Shabir said, you might think it and you might not, based on the sources. They say that Jesus' death by crucifixion is one of the best established facts of history. Let me read you a few quotations, just for those of you out there who don't know who I am and might not have any reason to trust me right now. The atheist New Testament scholar, Gerd Ludemann, says, Jesus' death as a consequence of crucifixion is indisputable. Wait a minute, Shabir, who knows what the source. This is an atheist saying, hey, you Christians, I disagree with you on all kinds of things. Jesus never Jesus never rose from the dead. He never performed any miracles. But when it comes to his crucifixion, that's indisputable. That's indisputable. And we'll talk about why they said this in a moment. John Dominic Crossan of the Jesus Seminar, it doesn't get any more liberal and out there than this, said that there is, quote, not the slightest doubt about the fact of Jesus' crucifixion under Pontius Pilate. There is not the slightest doubt. Wait, according to Shabir, the Bible's in doubt, right? We're in doubt.
And these guys doubt everything else.
Everything that can possibly be doubted.
They even say that it's most likely that Jesus' body was exhumed and eaten by dogs. But when it comes to the crucifixion, even they don't fudge at all.
Not the slightest doubt. In other words, we're not talking about 99% here. There is not the slightest doubt. Same guy, also John Dominic Crossan, said that he was crucified is as sure as anything historical can ever be. Right? Notice, I mean, we're talking about, think about things that have happened in the 20th century, wars and stuff like that. He says, this is as good as history gets. With Jesus' death by crucifixion, it's as good as history gets. Very different from what Shabir is saying. And the reason that's disturbing is Shabir reads these guys. Shabir,
well, that's probably why he's fudging, isn't it? And putting Jesus on the cross but not being killed.
And what you notice with Shabir is that whenever these guys say something that he can twist to support his case, he'll use it in a heartbeat. He'll use it in a heartbeat. Sure. But then when they totally disagree with him and they say, they're not saying Islam is false, but when they say there's no doubt about Jesus' crucifixion, they're obviously saying Islam got it wrong.
Right.
Then who cares what any of these guys says? Who are they? They're just a bunch of atheists and skeptics and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Marcus Board doesn't get much more skeptical than that. States that Jesus' execution is, quote, the most certain fact about the historical Jesus. If we know anything about Jesus, we know that he was executed under Pontius Pilate. Jewish scholar Giza Vermes says the Passion of Jesus is part of history. So the Passion is the entire series of events, including, leading up to and including Jesus' death by crucifixion.
Right.
According to Paula Fredrickson, the single most solid fact about Jesus' life is his death. He was executed by the Roman prefect Pilate on or around Passover in the manner Rome reserved particularly for political insurrectionists, namely crucifixion. And since Muslims are so fond of Bart Ehrman nowadays, right? Oh, Bart Ehrman says there are differences in the text of the Bible. Right. Any Christian scholar, any Christian textual critic would say the same thing. Sure. But since you Muslims are such fans of Bart Ehrman, why don't you take his advice here and leave Islam? Because what's he going to say? Ehrman says, one of the most certain facts of history is that Jesus was crucified on orders of the Roman prefect of Judea, Pontius Pilate. Notice what all of these guys are saying. They're not saying, hey, he may have died, he may not have. We can't really tell from the Bible. It's just ambiguous. We can't tell any. That's not what they're saying at all. They're saying, not the slightest doubt. One of the most certain facts of history, as good as history gets. Those are the sorts of things they're saying. Right. And yet Shabir is telling his Muslim audience, who don't know anything about the history of Jesus, who don't know anything about scholarly criticism, Shabir Ali is telling them, according to the Bible, there are all kinds of doubts about whether Jesus died.
And that is a gross misrepresentation of what the Scriptures say. I mean, there's no doubt in any of the four Gospels. There's no doubt in the New Testament. It's prophesied in the Old Testament. All of the apostles except one were killed for their belief that Jesus died on the cross. Just wasn't on the cross, but died on the cross. And if he's going to say Jesus was on the cross and didn't die, then they would have known that.
Yeah.
John was right in front of him when he died on the cross.
Yeah, and think about this for a second, right? Shabir is telling us, and we're going to see the passages that he goes to show that there are these so-called doubts. But think about this. Surah 1094.
Yeah.
What did it say? Surah 1094. Allah talking to Muhammad says, Muhammad, if you are in doubt about what we have revealed to you, ask those who read the book before you. Imagine I told you Muslims, well, the Quran is affirming that Muhammad was in doubt. Therefore, there are doubts about Muhammad's prophethood. Therefore, according to the Quran, we don't even know if Muhammad's being affirmed as a prophet. What would you say? The Muslim response would be, yes, Muhammad had a doubt there, but everywhere else in the Quran constantly affirms Muhammad as a prophet, right? In other words, hey, don't rip that out of the context of the rest of the Quran affirming that Muhammad is in fact a prophet, and say that since there's this little doubt here, then the whole book is just in doubt, right? Because Shabir's going to do that. Shabir's going to say, look, Pontius Pilate, he was surprised that Jesus was dead already. You see, the Bible is in doubt. The Bible isn't sure whether Jesus died by crucifixion. And this is, I mean, again, if you apply the same method to Islam, then the Quran the Quran is in doubt about the prophethood of Muhammad.
And there's only one verse in the Quran. Only one verse, singular verse. And talking about being in doubt, of course, this is a singular second-person verb in there, if you're in doubt, Muhammad. But if other Muslims throughout history who doubted, and many have doubted about the crucifixion in Islam, because of that only one verse, it's obscure, the meaning. If they took the advice that Allah gave to Muhammad, they would go and read the Bible and say, oh, okay, now it's clear.
Yeah,
he was crucified.
And when we say clear, think about these passages, because Shabir ignores all of these.
Yes.
He just goes to a couple of verses that he rips completely out of context, and then he tells his Muslim listeners, this is the Bible. This is why you can't. Bible just doesn't know. That's why you need to go to the Quran and get the right answer.
Which, even out of context, is weaker than water.
Yeah.
Doesn't prove anything.
Yeah, and so let me read just a couple of passages here. And I'll read them all from one gospel, right? You can find many more in the other gospels, many more in the rest of the books of the New Testament, the book of Acts, for instance, letters, and so on. Let me just read a couple of passages from the book of Matthew here. Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised up on the third day. Is this in doubt? Is
No.
Jesus saying here, I'm going up to Jerusalem, I may die, I may not, I'm probably just going to, fall asleep, pass out on the cross, wake up later in the tomb. It's something like that, I don't really know. Is that what Jesus is saying? What's it say? And be killed and be raised on the third day. So he's very specific. He's going to be killed, he's going to be raised on the third day. Chapter 17, so very next chapter, Jesus, we see something miraculous, and Jesus says in 17 verse 9, the passage says, as they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen, resurrection, from the dead.
From the
That's
dead,
death.
that means you got to die first, right? Not just be crucified.
Yeah, just a couple verses later, he says that the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands, right? And notice what it says. Let me back up a verse. Jesus says, Elijah is coming and will restore all things, but I say to you that Elijah already came. He's talking about John the Baptist. But I say to you that Elijah already came, and they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they wished. So also the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. Didn't they kill John?
That's how these, yeah.
They killed him, and he says, the Son of Man, that's him, that's Jesus, is going to suffer in the same way. So he's going to die, right?
Yes.
A few verses later, verse 22. And while they were gathering together in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day. This goes on and on and on and on and on in the Gospels. Jesus saying over and over like a beating drum, I'm going up to Jerusalem, I'm going to die, and then I'm going to rise from the dead. Shabir, who knows what the Bible says, right?
By the way, just so people understand, all of the Gospels attest to this, but David has specifically chosen Matthew because, after all, Shabir was pulling a reference out of context from specifically the book of Matthew when he spoke about Pilate. So this is the same book that Shabir is so wrongfully and foolishly trying to use against the crucifixion, which not only will show in just a moment, but prophesies the crucifixion. Jesus is a false prophet, if you can take it from that book.
Yeah, let me read two more quick passages from chapter 20. Just so, and again, still quoting the book of Matthew, right?
Yeah,
still many more in Mark, Luke, and John.
Yes.
This is, again, the book that Shabir says, well, the Bible's not the Bible. You can go either way on the Bible. You go either way because it's not really clear
Go
on what's
whichever way
going
it's
on, right?
convenient as a Muslim.
Chapter 20, beginning at verse 17. As Jesus was about to go up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside by themselves, and on the way he said to them, behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, And the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and will hand him over to the Gentiles to mock and scourge and crucify him, and on the third day he will be raised up. And in the same chapter, verse 28, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many.
And that ransom harkens back to the goat that was given for Abraham's son. And even the Quran says this is a ransom. Well, what happened? The ransom had to be killed. So too, the ransom of Christ had to be killed.
Now, my question is, how could Jesus make this any more clear? He says it over and over again. He tells his followers, I'm going up to Jerusalem, I'm going to die, then I'm going to rise. I'm going up, just want to make it clear, I'm going up to Jerusalem, I'm going to die, I'm going to rise. If that's not clear enough, keep in mind, I'm going up there, they're going to kill me, and after I've been killed, then I'm going to rise on the third day. In case you didn't understand it for the 50th time, I'm going up to Jerusalem, I'm going to die, and I'm going to rise. And Shabir looks at this and say, oh, who knows what Jesus is saying in these passages? Pilate didn't know. Pilate was surprised that he died, so the Bible just isn't clear.
The reason they didn't break his leg is because he had died. And he uses that as one of the reasons that, well, maybe he didn't die, they didn't break his leg. I mean, it's just complete misrepresentation of what the text says. Read on the Gospel of Matthew. I mean, we don't have time in this show to read the description of the crucifixion, the description of the death, the description of him personally giving up the ghost. We're going to take a break. Do you want to go ahead and take a break now?
Yeah, let's take a break and we'll get to some of those other clips.
All right, we're going to take a break.
See where Shabir's going with this.
We're talking about Shabir Ali. Shabir should be ashamed. I'm ashamed of Shabir. I thought he was a better Muslim apologist than what he's showing on this program. Nevertheless, he's denying the crucifixion. He's weaseling his way out of it by saying, well, maybe Jesus was on the cross, but he didn't die, just trying to maneuver so he can have a better argument. This is pitiful. Muslims, listen, call your friends, call your enemies. We'll be right back after a break to expose further this grand deception and to prove to you, Muslims, and whoever's out there, yes, indeed, Jesus did die on the cross. He died for your sins if you'll believe in him, and he raised the third day. Praise God forevermore. Let's take a break. We'll be right back with more Jesus or Muhammad after this. Praise the Lord. Welcome back to Jesus or Muhammad. Here I am with David Wood. We're talking about Shabir Ali and his sad attempt to try to deny the crucifixion and death of our Lord Jesus Christ. Brother David, would you like to say something, or we're going to go to the next clip?
Let's go ahead to the next clip and see. We're going to get into some of Shabir's evidence, because he's maintaining there's evidence from the Bible that the Bible isn't really clear on Jesus' death by crucifixion, even though Jesus said over and over and over again, like a beating drum, I'm going up to Jerusalem, I'm going to die. Well, that's not the Bible's final word on the issue.
Isn't it amazing? Our previous show, it just so happens, was Shabir telling us why we shouldn't trust the Bible and should trust the Quran. And now he's going to tell us why the crucifixion didn't happen and that we should trust the Bible, which casts doubt on it. Let's take a look at that clip right now.
And when a request was made to Pilate, the Roman governor, for the body to be released from the cross so that he could be given a decent burial, Pilate marveled as to whether he had died so soon, because usually crucifixion took a few days to kill a person. And Jesus, by all accounts, was there on the cross only for a few hours. So probably he wasn't dead then.
All right, well, here we go. Once again, Shabir Ali, just like most Muslims, he doesn't even quote a part of the Bible. He pulls out an idea from Pilate that is in the Gospel of Matthew, which David Wood has just been quoting, to try to cast doubt on what the Scriptures clearly say did happen, which Jesus died on the cross.
So let's go ahead and read what it says here, and I'll go ahead and begin at verse 42. This is Mark chapter 15. Mark chapter 15. I'll begin at verse 42. We'll get the context here.
Now, why didn't he read it like this? Go ahead.
This is the burial of Jesus. Chapter 15, verse 42 of Mark. When evening had already come, because it was the preparation day, that is the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea came, a prominent member of the council, who himself was waiting for the kingdom of God. And he gathered up courage and went in before Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. So Jesus died. We've already seen that over and over again. In fact, just to go back a few verses, chapter 15, verse 37, and Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last.
Gotcha.
So Jesus died, right?
Yes.
Gave up the ghost, according to the Bible.
Yes.
Gave up the ghost. So we get to just a few verses later, right after the Bible clearly says Jesus died. Joseph of Arimathea goes to Pilate. It says he asked for the body of Jesus. Why? Because if you're a crucifixion victim, Jesus Seminar has it right.
Yeah,
right? After that, they would take your body down, let you be ripped apart by dogs. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
They don't care about your body. And best case scenario, going to throw you in some pit with a bunch of other dead bodies.
It doesn't say they asked for Jesus. It says he asked for his body.
Yeah. Yeah. So Joseph of Arimathea, and you wouldn't, if you cared about someone, you don't want them ripped apart by dogs or something like that, right? So you want to give them a burial. So Joseph asked for the body of Jesus, and here's the verse Shabir is thinking of. Verse 44, Pilate wondered if he was dead by this time, and summoning the centurion, he questioned him as to whether he was already dead. And ascertaining this from the centurion, he granted the body to Joseph. Notice what it says, right? So Pilate wondered, because Shabir is right when he says some people could survive for several days.
They were surprised that he died so early.
Now, just to be clear, some people died just from the beating. They died during the beating.
Right.
They weren't even alive at the crucifixion. They nailed their dead body up to the cross.
Yeah.
So there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum. Some people died some people died immediately from the beating because your internal organs would be spilling out of you and stuff. Some people lasted for a few days on the cross.
Gotcha.
And lots of it actually depend on how severely they would beat you. If you were someone they wanted to keep up there for a few days because they want you to be humiliated in this way for several days and to go through this much agony, they would actually give you a less severe beating. Right? If they wanted to speed up the process, they give you a horrible beating and then you're dead. They're putting you out of your misery.
But the other two did die that day. We know
they had noticed they had to speed that one up. They had to speed that one up by breaking the legs.
Yeah.
So Pilate, notice all that happens here. All that happens here. They come in. Hey, Pilate, this guy would like Jesus' body because he wants to bury it.
Yeah.
Pilate says, really? Is he dead already?
Yeah.
Go check. The guy comes back. Yep, he's dead.
The centurion, which is a man over 100 of Roman soldiers, says absolutely, I've ascertained factually that he is in fact dead.
And just so viewers out there know how the process of crucifixion works, because they didn't take his pulse, right? They didn't check his pulse. Roman crucifixion, and this is why you'll never find anyone around anywhere near this time saying maybe he survived, like Shabir, right? The reason is these people were familiar with crucifixion.
Right.
They had seen it. They'd seen it with their own eyes, and that's why there's no doubt. They knew how crucifixion worked. Just for viewers out there, you basically have three stages of crucifixion. You have the scourging, and it's not just a whip like you might be familiar with. This is called a flagrum. It's strands of leather, and woven into the leather are chunks of bone and metal. And so when they would beat you, and if you're interested in seeing this, watch The Passion of the Christ. They actually got that right. When they would hit you with the flagrum, those chunks of bone and metal would dig into your flesh, and then they would rip it, and then they would rip it off. And they would keep doing this, and part of the purpose of this beating was they didn't want you kicking and struggling while they were nailing you to a cross, right? You're going to be weakened from all the blood loss. You're going to be weakened from the blood loss, and you're going to be wanting to get it over now. Right? From all the agony you're in. Anyway, they would beat you across the front. They would beat you across the back. We have records of people's their skin and their muscles hanging from their backs. We have records of people's intestines spilling out. They were beaten so severely across their stomach that their guts spilled out. This is just part one, ladies and gentlemen. This is just part one. After that, they would put you on the cross. They would nail you to a cross. And the idea is, and you could practice this on some monkey bars if you ever want to, if you hang long enough in this position, for a while you can hold yourself up, right? Your muscles can sustain you for a while. Much more difficult if you've just gone through Roman scourging. But if you're hanging in this position for a while, eventually these muscles give out, and you're just hanging. And what happens is your chest capacity, once your muscles have given out, your chest capacity is fully extended. And you can't exhale, right? You have to go to exhale, right? You can't do that. Your muscles have already given out. And so your lungs are full, and you can't exhale to get a fresh breath. Breathing becomes extremely difficult. And that's the reason they put the nail through your ankles. Or they would tie the bottom of your feet, right? They did that so you could actually, when you're gasping for breath, you could push yourself up to get some fresh air. Now the thing is, you can do that for a while, right?
Yeah.
And they've tested people where they've had some young, fit 22, 23-year-olds hold themselves up in a position. They didn't actually crucify them, but they put their feet in a little slot and said, push yourself up in a weird position, kind of hold yourself there. After 11, 12 minutes, if you're in really good shape, you see their legs trembling, right? And eventually they just can't do it anymore and they hang back down, right? Now the next time they have to go up for air, you can't hold yourself up for as long. You hold yourself up a little, if you went 12 minutes the first time, maybe you go 10 minutes the next time. Next time you go maybe 9 minutes and stuff. And so this is why this was the most horrible practice the Romans could think of. The Romans are trying to set an example to people who are going to challenge them. The example is, if you mess with us, this is what's going to happen to you. Now, do you want this to happen to you? No, because it's the most horrifying thing you can imagine. And so during this crucifixion practice, basically, you'd have some guys would push themselves up, they catch their breath until their legs can't hold them up anymore, and then they go back down. And then they start running out of air. And they stay down here until they can't breathe, right? And then they push themselves up on their legs. And they hold themselves up as long as they can breathing. And then they can't do it anymore. Their legs give out. They drop back down. And they go back and forth. And again, some people did make it for days, depending on how severe the beating was. But that's just step 2. Step 3. Once the Romans knew that you were dead, they practiced a death blow. They practiced a death blow. We have records of them setting people on fire, of them taking people down and feeding them to animals, of crushing people's skulls, and of driving spears through their hearts. And basically, once they knew you were dead, and they could tell you're dead, you're not pushing yourself up anymore. Once you're there, you're hanging, you've been hanging for 15 minutes, they can be pretty sure you're dead. They see you hanging for 30 minutes, you haven't come up for air, you haven't breathed in 30 minutes. They know you're dead. I don't care if you check your pulse or not.
Yeah, but David, they didn't crush Jesus' skull, and they didn't burn his body. What are you trying to say?
What did they do, Pastor Joseph?
Well, you're supposed to tell us.
Here's what you have. The Romans practiced a death blow. The death blow could be different, right? But one way or another, they were going to make sure the person was dead. And what do we have in the Gospel of John? They put the spear right into his heart. Why are they putting the spear right into his heart? Because that's part of crucifixion. At the end, once they already know you're dead, then they either crush your skull or feed you to animals or set you on fire or put a spear through your heart, just to be sure. This is after they know you're dead. This is after they know you're dead. So Shabir says, oh, they didn't check his pulse. Well, guess what? The Romans didn't check pulses on any of the crucifixion victims. Is Shabir saying all those crucifixion, maybe they all survived? Really? After you've been set on fire, after you've endured crucifixion? So think about how ridiculous this is. Jesus has been through the beating. Jesus tells his followers he's going up to Jerusalem, he's going to die. Then we're told he actually died. Then someone wants the body, and he finds out, yes, Jesus was dead. We put a spear right through his heart. Is there any doubt that Jesus is dead? Shabir says, Pilate was wondering if he was dead.
Why didn't he read any of this other stuff from the Bible? Why didn't he read John
Because
chapter
then
19?
his Muslim followers might start thinking, wait a minute, maybe I need to look at this very, very carefully. And he doesn't want that. He doesn't want that. He wants them to say, oh, Pilate didn't know? Oh, yeah, there you have it. I agree with Shabir. The Bible just isn't clear on this. And that's why.
This is sheer deception. This is Muslims, you need to understand. Shabir Ali, your poster boy for Muslim apologetics, he is deceiving you. This is clear that he is deceiving. If he wants to give a good reasoned argument, why didn't he read what David Wood read to you? Why didn't he read John chapter 19 that says in verse 32, then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and the other who were crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, then they did not break his legs. And he even uses breaking the legs as one of the reasons. Listen to what it says. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And John, the apostle of Jesus, who wrote this gospel, says, and guess what? I have seen it with my own eyes. Folks, Muhammad didn't see that. Shabir Ali didn't see that. John, the apostle, saw it firsthand witness.
Yeah, and we're actually going to get to that in a moment because he's going to make something. He's going to make an argument out of those out of the broken legs.
Completely twisting the text.
Yeah. So we have a couple more clips. These will all be short because we've been through all the evidence and so on. So let's go ahead and look at our next clip, and we'll see. Keep in mind what Shabir said. Right? The Bible isn't clear. We read you what? Did we just say, oh, the Bible's clear? No, we quoted passage after passage after passage. We quoted even non-Christian scholars saying it's indisputable. Jesus' death is indisputable. And Shabir is maintaining the Bible is in doubt. There's plenty of room for doubt here. So let's see. We've already seen his arguments so far haven't established anything except for he's apparently trying to keep his Muslim viewers very, very ignorant. But let's go ahead and see if he's got anywhere else to go. Let's look at the next clip.
Let's look at that clip right now.
So the Quran is basically saying, as for their boast that they killed Jesus, son of Mary, ma qataluhu wa ma salabuhu walakin shubbiha lahum. They killed him not, nor crucified him, but so it appeared to them. Abdul Majid Daribadi in his Tafsir al-Quran explains the word crucifixion as meaning to kill a person by means of crucifixion. It's not just the crucifixion itself, but it's a method of execution. So as a method of execution, it failed on that occasion. To me, this is what the Quran is saying. They killed him not, and in case they were thinking, but wait a minute, we crucified him, the Quran is saying, well, you didn't even do that, did you? Because if you look back at the records, you will see that there was some doubt.
Did you notice something? The Quran, Surah 4157, he quotes, says, they did not, la salabu or la katilu. They did not crucify him, nor did they kill him. But you notice what he's trying to say is, well, actually, they did crucify him, but they didn't kill him. And he goes to some Muslim scholar to defend himself, say, oh, but this Muslim scholar says, well, crucifixion doesn't really mean crucifixion. Crucifixion only means crucifixion when they're actually killed. Yeah. But the Quran makes a distinction between, crucifixion. They say he wasn't crucified, nor was he killed.
It says, and it specifically says, they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him. So wait a minute. Obviously, nor did they crucify him means they didn't kill him by crucifixion, then according to Shabir Ali, what the Quran is saying, they didn't kill him, nor did they kill him by crucifixion. Obviously, if they didn't kill him by crucifixion, right? Well, so what? The perfectly clear, perfectly eloquent Quran is just being redundant here. It's like me saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, suppose someone was accused of stabbing someone to death, right? And I said, no, he didn't kill him, nor did he stab him to death. Obviously, if you didn't kill him, you didn't kill him with a knife.
Well, Shabir say that they did crucify him, but they didn't kill him. The Quran, I believe, is saying they didn't crucify him, nor did they kill him.
Yeah, and I'd say that's obvious, right? Yeah. And that's the way all the early Muslim commentators interpreted
or Muhammad.
it. That's the way Ibn Abbas interpreted it. That's why Ibn Kathir interpreted it. That's why everyone interpreted it. It's when you get down to the 20th century and 21st century when Muslims start making this silly claim about Jesus surviving crucifixion. Actually, go back to the 1900s where it actually comes from. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who started the Ahmadis.
Really?
He's the Muslim. He's the Muslim who started spreading this idea that Jesus didn't die didn't die by crucifixion. But I mean, wow, what is going on here?
This show should be entitled Shabir or Muhammad. Which one are you going to choose, right?
Yeah. So the Quran is maintaining that Jesus wasn't killed, and he wasn't killed by crucifixion. Yeah. If you just read that, notice at best case scenario, the Quran is unclear here, right?
That's right.
Because was Jesus put on the cross or not? As a Muslim, you have to say the Quran is so unclear here, even our Muslim scholars were deceived by this. Even centuries of Muslim commentators were deceived by this. Even Muhammad and his own companions were deceived by this because they all thought it meant Jesus was substituted by someone else. And why? Why else would this be a problem? Well, notice how the Bible uses crucifixion, right? The Bible can also mean killed him by crucifying or just nailing him to a cross, right? So notice Jesus is still alive in chapter 27, verse 35, when it says, and when they had crucified him, they divided up his garments among themselves by casting lots. And Jesus is still talking after this. So he's still alive, but he's already been crucified. Why? What's crucified mean? Crucified here means nailed into a cross.
Right.
So which one does the Quran mean? Well, the Quran doesn't tell us. The Quran doesn't even tell us. It just says he wasn't crucified. Which one does it mean? And the reason I find that important is because just in the same passage, it makes fun of Christians and Jews for not having certainty.
Yeah.
You're Muslim scholars. Your top Muslim apologists can't even agree on what the Quran means here, and you're turn around and make fun of us and say we don't have certainty when even the most critical scholars in the world say we have certainty on this matter.
And there's other verses in the Quran that mitigate against this understanding.
Yeah. Matter of fact, let me read this verse and go ahead and read to them from Surah 3 there. Yeah. The angel said, this is Matthew chapter 28, verse 5. The women come to the tomb. Verse 5, the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who has been crucified. He is not here, for he has risen just as he said. So notice what he said. The angel says, remember when Jesus said over and over again that he's going to die and that he's going to rise from the dead?
Yeah.
And then remember, he was crucified and nailed to the cross and he was dead and he put a spear through his heart. Remember that? And now you're showing up here and he's gone? Yeah, that's because he rose from the dead, just like he said he was going to do.
That very next phrase, David says, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead.
And Shabir says, well, the Bible's not clear here. But think about this. If the Bible's not clear when it says, when Jesus says he's going up to Jerusalem to die, and then it says he dies, and then an angel comes along and says, oh, he died. But the Bible's not clear because, Pontius Pilate was surprised he was dead already. Then would Muslims also have the same problem? Would Muslims also have the same problem?
Yeah.
What do you have?
Well, I mean, I just say this. It's almost like poor Shabir's got to run to the Bible because the Quran certainly doesn't give him enough proof. Let's just take Surah Al-Maryam real quickly. Surah Al-Maryam,
okay.
Surah 19, verse 33. It says, and peace, this is supposed to be Jesus speaking, and peace upon me on the day I was born, the day I die, and on the day I am raised to life. And so Jesus says, and remember this, verse 34 says, such is Isa, son of Maryam. Okay, this is talking about Jesus. So once again, verse 33, listen to the order very carefully. Jesus says, he says, وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيَّ يَوْمَ الْوَلَدِ وَيَوْمَ الْمَوْتِ وَيَوْمَ البَّعْثِ. This last word, talking about raised to life. Peace be upon me the day I was born, number one. The day that I die, number two. And the day that I'm raised to life, number three. Hey, that's the gospel. Jesus was born, God in the flesh. He lived a perfect life. He died on the cross. And on the third day, he rose again. They got the order right. But what Shabir is telling us, and what modern day apologists are telling us, that the Quran is saying, that no, Jesus was born, and then he didn't die at all. But Allah raised him to himself. But sometime, according to the hadith, sometime a long time from now, he's going to come back and live and get married and have children. Oh, and then he'll die. But that contradicts the clear order of the words of Jesus himself.
Yeah. And the reason this is a perfect example is suppose you opened up to that verse.
Yeah.
Jesus is saying,
peace be
born,
upon me.
going to die, going to be raised. Right?
Yep.
You would look at that and say, oh, so Jesus is going to die, and then he's going to be raised.
Right.
Now, if you bring this up to a Muslim, what does the Muslim do? He reconciles the passage. He says, no. You can't rip that verse out of the context of the rest of the Quran.
Okay.
And if we go to Surah 4, verse 157, it says very clearly that Jesus didn't die. And so he reconciles them and says, so what this must mean is that, yes, Jesus wasn't crucified and he ascended, but he's going to return at his second coming, and then he's going to die, and then he's going to be raised. So what do? They harmonize the passages to say, and here's what this passage must mean. Even though that verse, Surah 19, verse 33, is not clear by itself, what do? They harmonize. But notice, what do Muslims do with the Bible? Shabir Ali goes to, Pilate was surprised that he's dead already. That means that the Bible's saying maybe he wasn't dead. Really, Shabir? What do you do? What do you do with the Quran? If the Quran is unclear on a verse, you look at the other verses which are clear. Here, what does it mean to say Pilate was surprised? How is that saying Jesus didn't die? Pilate wasn't even there when Jesus died. That's why he doesn't know. And even in the same passage it says, and Pilate wanted it confirmed. And then he found out it was confirmed. And you combine this with Jesus saying he's going to die, with the angel coming along afterwards saying, yeah, he's dead. And why do you not apply the same method? Why do you apply totally different standards? Why do you say, if it's the Quran, we have to harmonize the passage. If it's the Bible, we can rip anything we want out of context, totally ignore everything else the Bible says? We have 2 more clips in only a couple minutes. Let's try and get to them real quick.
Let's take the next clip right now, and we'll get that reference for you in a moment. Let's take the next clip right now.
This explains why in Matthew's Gospel it says that the Jews who wanted him dead, it came back the next day, which was the day of the Sabbath. Because the crucifixion occurred on the Friday, they said, and then the Sabbath is the Saturday. The Jews came back and they went to Pilate and they said, well, wait a minute, seal up the tomb, lest the disciples will come, steal his body away, and then they will proclaim that he resurrected from the dead, and then the second deception would be greater than the first. What did they think was the first deception? You see, they left the scene on Friday thinking that Jesus would be dead.
Right.
They had requested that the legs of the crucified victims be broken, but only the other 2 victims had their legs broken, and Jesus' legs were spared. So what's the purpose of breaking the legs? One theory is that by breaking the legs, you hasten death.
Right, right.
So the Jews left the scene thinking that his legs would be broken, he'd be done for. They heard later on that his legs weren't broken, and now they're saying, well, wait a minute, seal up the tomb, because the next thing you know, he'll come out of the tomb alive, and then they will say that he resurrected from the dead.
Right.
So the last deception is worse than the first.
Now, there are 2 things here. Shabir points out that Jesus' legs weren't broken, and the legs of the others were, right? And that the Jewish leaders came to Pilate and talked about this deception and so on, right?
Right.
And let's make sure this next deception isn't worse than the first, right?
Right, right.
And so the first deception, what? That Jesus died. Right? That was the
Allah's
deception, right? Now let's just look at both of these passages, and you Muslims out there, think about this. Think about what your greatest apologists do with Scripture. Let's start reading at chapter 19, verse 31 of the Gospel of John. Then the Jews, because it was the day of preparation, so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day, asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other who was crucified with him. But coming to Jesus, when they saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Shabir leaves that part out, says, oh, they didn't break Jesus' legs. Why? Oh, see, you see that?
I wonder why he left that out.
Now, and let's read the next verse that Shabir doesn't quote. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. That means he ruptured the pericardium that surrounds the heart. So notice what Shabir does. Oh, see, they broke their legs, and you break the legs to hasten death. They didn't break Jesus' legs, therefore they're not hastening the death, therefore he didn't die. And leaves out the part where the entire reason they don't break his legs is because he was already dead. Since he was already dead, there's no reason to hasten his death.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And then they did the death blow anyway, where they pierce your heart. We don't need to break your legs when you're already dead. We're just going to shove a spear through your heart.
It's undeniable.
And you see that? Oh, the Bible's in doubt here. Now let's go to the other passage.
Yeah.
And again, notice this, and you're right, this is flat out deception. Yeah. Shabir's read these passages. He knows his followers haven't, and so he quotes them and deliberately misrepresents the text. So, Matthew chapter 27, we'll begin at verse 62. Now on the next day, the day after the preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered together with Pilate and said, Sir, we remember that when he was still alive, that deceiver said, so who's the deceiver here? Jesus is the deceiver.
Supposedly,
yeah.
yes.
So they're calling Jesus the deceiver. Why? Right. Because he convinced people that he's the Messiah and so on, and that he's the, he's all these things, right? Mm-hmm. He's a deceiver. Notice. So the deception they're referring to with the first deception is Jesus deceiving people about who he is.
Yes.
So, that deceiver said, after 3 days I am going to rise again. Therefore give orders for the grave to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise the disciples may come and steal him away and say to the people, he has risen from the dead, and the last deception will be worse than the first. Right. So, and Shabir takes this and says, oh, the last deception, what's the first deception? maybe it's Jesus dying by crucifixion.
There you
That
go.
was all deception. Really? Jesus deceived them into that he was dying by crucifixion? No, according to Islam, Allah deceived them. And guess what? If Jesus didn't die on the cross, Jesus was a deceiver because he told his followers over and over again that he's going to die by crucifixion. And then the angel's a deceiver too. He comes along afterwards. Hey, Jesus died. Notice, even the passage Shabir, oh, the Bible's in doubt here. The Bible's in doubt. And we go to the actual passage that he says, here's where my evidence is. Here's where my evidence is. It says there was a first deception. They tell you what the first deception is. It's Jesus talking about himself, and he's a deceiver.
Right.
That's why they wanted him crucified, because he was deceiving people according to them, right?
Who's the deceiver?
And
Satan
so they want to
and
make
Shabir
sure.
Ali.
Yeah.
Shabir
And
Ali.
so they want to make sure. That he doesn't get this second deception in by his disciples stealing the body. And Shabir looks at that and says, oh yeah, Jesus might not have died.
Brother David, we're out of time, but the verse for our viewers that we referred to earlier is Surah 3:55. And talk about confusion, talk about deception. Surah 3:55. And when Allah said, O Isa, I am going to terminate the period of your stay on earth and cause you to ascend unto me. Actually, the word there is tawafikana. Tawafikana, which is, I am going to kill you. I'm going to cause you to die and raise you to myself. Here again is the order. Who's confused about this? Why does Shabir go to the Bible? Because the Quran's confused about it. Who's deceiving? Allah's deceiving. Shabir Ali's deceiving. And Muslims, if you believe this junk, you're deceived too. It's time to come to the foot of the cross. The cross did happen. Jesus did die for you. Jesus or Muhammad? The answer is clear. It is Jesus Christ and Him alone. This is Jesus or Muhammad. We'll be back with you next week. Until then, God bless and good night.